Hello and welcome to our session on the growing crisis in Sudan and its global implications. I'm Catherine Warwick and I'm here to moderate this panel, but our speakers are going to be three participants from the Next Century Foundation. We have Ayman Baldo, William Morris, and Mark Hambley, and the three of them are going to choose the order in which they'd like to speak and maybe give further introductions. But I'd like to turn it over to them now, and after they speak, we'll have some time for question and answer.
I think Iman will speak first, but if we can ask you to move the camera slightly and so that you're more in center of the stage, Catherine. You're not in our picture.
I will give it a shot.
Okay, thank you. Iman.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present here the case of Sudan. What is happening in Sudan with the war and the global implications. I am the head of the Sudan unit with NCF, with my colleagues here, NCF UK. I would like to start by introducing what is ushering all this catastrophe in the shape of the December Revolution. In December 2018, the people of Sudan showcased an audacious faith in the future of their country, in freedom, justice, and peace. People up and down the country have demonstrated relentlessly, showing a majestic scorn in the face of violence, tyranny, and death. They created a utopia at the protest square. They did not want to delve in the ambiguity of the engagement of others, especially the lack of engagement with peace when the chance availed itself. They wanted to defy how previous events have denied them participation in the unfolding events that impacted the very existence of their country. They deserve far better than what has become of the country post-April 2023, when the warring generals previously shoulder to shoulder came into a state that could be described by the likes of Sigmund Freud as instincts and their vicissitudes. This war has not started in April 2015. There were many wars in areas in Sudan, in the peripheries, in the center, and in between. In Darfur, 20 years ago, the war saw the first atrocity in the shape of the genocide of 2003. These wars were wars of visions and wars of egos. They were proxy wars, waged and left to simmer until eventually they started at the heart of the country, Khartoum, on the 13th of April 2023. The definition and description of this war as being nonsensical is not correct. Now it is called the war about the integrity and pride of the Sudanese. It shows you how far removed and disconnected the warring parties and their allies are. There is will and intent on both sides to disband the forces of democratization and to stop on track the December Revolution and the hope and aspiration of the Sudanese people for civilian rule and democratic rule. The warring parties have compelling, conspicuous, and latent incentives to continue to be party of a governing structure. They hope to have 4 goals. First of all, they would like to continue the control of massive resources of capital. They both enjoy benefits and appropriate diffused networks of illicit trade. This trade is made available by the war economy. Both of them are actually aspiring to save their necks from trials within and without the country for the crimes they committed. Both of them did not want to have civilian rules or democratization. RSF on its part did not want to integrate into an army, wanted to be independent and continue to be a dynasty for one family called the Dagalo family. These parties both have external support. They have resources to continue this war for a long time. But unfortunately, the war is not only in something to do with inside Sudan. This war has some socioeconomic and geostrategic objectives of others as well. I would like to quote Foreign Affairs in its last episode when it says that the war is not merely a reprise of all tensions. New players have joined the fray, international actors whose contributions to the violence both complicate the conflict and provide fresh opportunities to resolve it. We'd like to see how this is going to be resolved with our kind of initiative, which is going to be only civilian based. Middle Eastern countries see especially tempting opportunities to exploit Sudan's natural resources, access export along the Red Sea, use it as a base to combat the Houthis in Yemen, squash pro-democracy efforts, and strengthen the hand of Islamists or anti-Islamist groups depending on the intervening country in the region. The illicit exportation of gold has become a particularly major source of funding for the war. Egypt is now also buying gold originating from areas controlled by Sudan's army. The United Arab Emirates has become a destination point of gold mined from RSF-controlled areas, and the country is allegedly delivering weapons to the RSF. Russia Wagner paramilitary company also facilitates large-scale purchase of RSF-controlled gold and provide RSF with weaponry, including surface-to-air missiles. We would like to say very quickly that this is a policy paper. I am trying to exploit the opportunities that will facilitate the cooperation between the Sudanese civil forces and the international community to begin in earnest the efforts needed to stop the war, to design swift and effective interventions to avoid the looming famine and to avert imminent collapse of the economy and the country afterwards. The ultimate goal is to highlight the possibilities that will pave the way for practical programs of reconstruction of the country and the return of the IDPs and the refugees in the near future. The paper transcends ontological and epistemological paradigms, and I am adopting a pragmatism approach in international relations as a methodology. We employ discourse analysis and text analysis, but fortify them with information by first-hand perspectives and insight from respondents, both inside Sudan and outside. I actually talk to people in Chad, women especially. I'm talking to refugees in Kampala. I am talking to evacuees inside the United Kingdom in its all areas, families who have come here, but I have also managed to contact legal experts, financial experts and bankers, and I talk to experts and researchers in the mining sector and the mineral resource sector, in addition to management consultants. What is happening in Sudan are vital signs that is telling you about how many people are starving, how many women are raped, sexual violence, and the number of people who are even across the border do not have access to food because according to the WFP reports, we do not have access, and how the corridors for humanitarian aid is not even available. I'm not gonna go into details at all because this is information available in the public space. But I would like to say that the Sudan case is ignored, and many commentators have said that this is a crisis that is intentionally ignored by the community worldwide. Linda Thomas Greenfield, the US ambassador to the UN, said, "Through the sounds of gunfire and shelling, the people of Sudan have heard our silence. They ask why we have forsaken them, and they have been forgotten." I am telling this conference that there are so many things happening in Sudan that will not allow the international community to forget Sudan. And there is no way with what is happening now in the region, what is happening with the objectives I have just outlined, those people who are branding themselves as moderators and guarantors and mediators, people who have seen people dying and children, reminding us of the little girl and the vulture, the 1993 Carter photograph, after which he committed suicide. The vulture waiting for the child to die to eat it. Now we have 5 million children in that position, 2 children dying every day in Zamzam camp. In order for us to find that now the rift in the south, calling for the Adbara attack 2 days ago, that is informing us with the rift inside the ranks, with the militias coming to embolden them, with all the views and the ideas that are influencing the control inside SAF. According to Khulud Khair, the security and policy expert, these influences are going to see very difficult kind of attempts by SAF to control its ranks. Now you have rifts inside the ranks of the belligerents themselves, and the civilians are not away from this problem. The civilians are having some kind of not ideological, but rifts that are imposed also by regional kind of influences. Now Taqaddum has been victimized. They want to take them to court. They actually issued warrants and arrests, saying that these people have dismantled the constitution and whatever you call it the order. This order is not there, it is not existent because we have an illegitimate government after the coup of 2021. But we are trying to say that we, the civilians, are going to be talking to the international community by virtue of Sustainable Development Goals 16 and 17. Development Goal 17 says that development of civil society action plans, roadmaps are actually allowed. The framework of revitalized globalization of partnership for sustainable development supported by the concrete policies, which I'm going to be outlining very quickly, and actions are outlined in the outcome document of the Third International Conference of Financing Development. We are following the rules of the United Nations, and we are trying to say that if they are looking for the need for significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources, and the effective use of those finances in order to give strong support to developing countries in their efforts to promote sustainable development, we're going to say that these are more pertinent in the side of the corpuses of kind of laws, the spirit of law, and the letter of law to date, especially with the ceasefires that have not actually taken hold. The international community that does not want to have any kind of implementation guaranteeing any monitoring and providing the safe passages and corridors is not there, let alone talking about international aid. International aid and the April 15th conference in France is not going to come with anything new. But our new proposal is going to show that when the Sudanese people have the cost, the gold, and the natural resource, we are going to be able to barter that in the international community. We're going to use international trade to say that we have actually bankable resources. We have lead that is purest in the world, 90% purity. We have gum arabic that is having 14 specific species in Sudan. This gum arabic is used in American oil extraction with the kind of process called chemical flooding. And that is why we would like to approach the American government and Congress. When Rich in May 2023 said he wants the architecture and the architects of the American policymaking to change, we are going to be with them. We would like to change the architecture of international aid that will allow America to have the gum arabic only except the exceptional commodity for all the years of the sanctions during which Sudan lost $700 billion of income. The gum arabic was an exception in American kind of international engagement with its kind of partners. We would like the Americans to now tell us the gum that they are actually buying is going to be given some kind of trust. The money is going to be coming. It is a material that we would like to trade. But the kind of income from that we would like to come in time, very timely, very kind of guaranteed passage. Humanitarian aid, no, we are going to call it exchange, humanitarian exchange. The Sudanese people are exchanging their resources for aid, for medical resources, to buy the medicals, not only vaccination, but life-saving medication. That's why when we have 5 million children of acute hunger who are going to be dying of malnutrition, would like to remind the international community, the trade organizations, and the communities, economic communities in the region, especially in Africa, that we have the trade, we have the material. The gold is the most important thing that is fortifying the arsenal of people in Russia in order to fight Ukraine. Europe and the West are siding Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting with SAF in Sudan. Wagner is fighting with RSF. This tells you the globalization of the crisis at the title of this session. Sudan is the theater of many people in the region and internationally fighting to actually have their own scores about their own conflicts. We would like our initiative as Sudanese people, especially led by women, to tell every kind of trader that even our silicon, which is very, very pure, now exported from Northern Kordofan in its millions of tons without us knowing where the money is going. So the gold will be in a trust fund whereby whoever is buying the gold through official channels like Turkey and Italy, we are going to be having some kind of arrangement with them. The people who are buying it in illicit and black market going through the UAE, we are also going to approach them, but we will also approach the EU because the EU have the Khartoum process. We would like to see whether this is still going and still empowering economically and professionally the ranks of RSF. They were used for the stop of any kind of imagination of anybody displaced by the war in order to cross to come to Europe. The EU also has some kind of might. They can sanction people because of domestic violence or because of sexual violence, because of all sorts of violences in terms of its kind of rank and methodologies and modalities of work. So we would like to see that if the world is actually knowing that we live in the same threat of the Sea, if you have the Houthis and if you have the mass and vast kind of volume of investment in the KSA areas like Neom City bordering us, do they actually think that the security in that area is not important? Do they think that terrorism is not going to be rampaging in this area? Do they think that the food security is not important? Globally, we are now affected by not only like climate change, but the driving factors that are drying rivers and the arable lands. We have 100 million hectares of fertile land. The food security is very important for the region and for the world. So in order for you to see how we are important, we cannot be ignored, put in perspective what is now facing the world on its face: terrorism, food security, global warming, and migration. If the Sudanese people are gonna die in their millions, we are also hoping that people will note 3 generations of Sudan are not gonna be there. We need the capital, human capital in Sudan. With people dying and with malnourished children, what is gonna be the shape of the Sudanese nation in the near future and in the far future? That is not gonna be a sustainable thing in the area or in the region or in the world at large. There are so many kind of arenas that will show you that Sudan is part and parcel of the international community. And if we have to live together, we can come with some improvisation, very practical and very solid and very doable, feasible, desirable, and doable approaches. The policies are going to be provided with this paper for publication. It's going to be detailed, and all policy objective with its policy narrative and justification is going to be there. And we really hope that this conference will take forward to the United States, policymakers and everybody around, that this is not an internalization of global justice. You have an ambassador at large for global criminal justice. We didn't see any justice happening in Sudan. We didn't see the genocidal kind of threats and the many United Nations Security Council resolutions going nowhere. We have a United Nations resolution from the Security Council that we need to stop the war in Sudan, ceasefire upon ceasefire. What we are asking for is not a ceasefire. We need to stop the war. We need to deplete the resources that are fueling the war. The civilians, especially women, would like to be in participation for all the negotiations. We need all these ceasefire talks now in Manama. In Egypt now they are talking. On the 18th of April, Saudi Arabia is going to be brokering another talk. Civilians are going to be forgotten again. We would like to be part of that, especially women leadership. I leave the rest for the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That is a very stirring first talk for this panel, and I think it really sets an important tone here. I see that there is one question in the Q&A, but I'm going to leave these until the end so that all the speakers have had their chance to speak first. So I believe, Mark, were you going to go next?
You're muted, Mark.
Can you unmute? There we go.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. Thank you very much for the excellent introduction, Iman. You've noted several points which I'll try to reiterate. To be sure, the Sudanese civil war is brutal, devastating, and shows no signs of coming to an end. It's a war which has been largely forgotten by an outside world, which is currently transfixed by equally appalling conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, which are apparently believed to have more significant importance to worldwide security. This is wrong. This war is fought principally between the Sudan Armed Forces, the so-called SAF, under the command of General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, headed by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti. But the war is fueled by outside interests and countries who are vying for their own self-interest, as Ayman has very correctly noted. Hostilities erupted last April in the holy month of Ramadan. There's been direct fighting starting in Khartoum, in many parts of the country, especially in Darfur, and spreading now down to the central core of the country, Wad Mandi, including into the key agricultural areas, which Ayman has referred to. The RSF is accused of atrocities against civilians, including killings, rape, and pillage, while the Sudanese Armed Forces aircraft have bombed civilian targets and critical infrastructure. This war has caused humanitarian crisis of unprecedented size. According to the United Nations figures from January 2024, of Sudan's 49 million people, 5.9 million are internally displaced and 1.4 million have fled as refugees, with 25 million people, half the population, in need of humanitarian assistance with a looming food crisis and risk of famine. Compared to famine, we have a very serious problem in the Middle East, to say the least. Yemen as well has problems in this regard. Now, the prospects for a democratic transition, so bright after the nonviolent uprising that overthrew the long-standing military Islamist regime of President Omar al-Bashir in April 2019 in the rubble of Khartoum. Sudan's civil movement has also been scattered. Political parties are struggling to form a common platform. Many neighborhood resistance committees, the backbone of civic protests, have turned themselves into emergency groups for humanitarian services, while some have formed armed self-defense groups, others have simply disintegrated. Up to 18% of the country's 49 million people, just noted, have so far been displaced. Khartoum, which grew because of oil revenues prior to 2014 into a large and modern, bustling capital city of over 4 million people, is now in ruin. It looks more like Beirut during its civil war of half a century ago, which some of us fortunately can't compare. Sudan's war is also a vortex of transnational conflicts and global rivalries that threaten to set a wider region aflame. From the Red Sea to the West Africa Sahel, from the Mediterranean to Central Africa, neighboring countries are affected by the flow of refugees, the movement of armed groups, and the disruption of trade. South Sudan depends upon the revenues from oil exports through a pipeline that crosses fiercely contested areas to its neighboring northern part. Most fighting in the civil war is directed between SAF and RSF, but there are a number of other armed groups being drawn in alongside a new self-defense groups. The SAF is a quarrelsome coalition, which includes various Islamic secure track veterans of Bashir regime who veto any moves by al-Burhan towards compromise with either Hemedti or other civilians. The RSF, meanwhile, is a novel amalgam of army mercenary forces, trading conglomerate, notably in gold, and a vehicle for Hemedti's political ambition. It shows indiscipline with some RSF-allied Arab militia pursuing local vendettas and land grabbing, and may fracture when its fighting has run out of cities to loot. As Ayman has suggested, Sudan's war is entangled in a circle of conflict involving its African neighbors to the east and the west. The RSF originated in the infamous Janjaweed militia of Darfur, and recruits from nomads in Chad and Niger. Its units active in Libya and the Central African Republic. Egypt, meanwhile, backs the SAF but wants to suppress the Islamist elements within it. On the other hand, Ethiopia's aggressive pursuit of access to the sea has reconfigured East African alliances. Ethiopia is now allied with the RSF, while Eritrea aligns with the Sudanese Armed Forces. Talks between Cairo and Asaba over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam have broken down, raising fears of a proxy conflict. South Sudan, still economically dependent on relations with Sudan, also remains very vulnerable. Sudan has become a cockpit in which the rising powers of the Middle East seek to project their power and gain an advantage over their rivals. surpassing long-established actors such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia, as well as its relative newcomers such as Iran, Qatar, and Turkey. United Arab Emirates is the most assertive intervener, backing the RSF, providing arms and money to Chad and Ethiopia. Iran, for its part, has also been spotting airlifting arms in the country as well. The breadth of these complications has no precedent. The contours of looming crisis have been evident for some years. Sudan has wrestled for decades, as Ayman has noted, with twin problems of apparently bottomless economic crisis and governing an ethnically and religiously diverse nation. Since the Civil War broke out last year, a succession of efforts to bring the warring parties to the negotiating table has failed. United States, Saudi talks in Jeddah, and an Egyptian initiative, repeated efforts by Northeast African leaders have stumbled because of internal Sudanese veto or outside interference. Conspicuously lacking is a mechanism for ensuring that the Middle Eastern powers, especially the United Arab Emirates, come to the table with constructive proposals. The U.S. has not raised its political engagement to a high enough level for it to be taken seriously in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. An ambassador designate to the problem, it simply is not enough. It should not be difficult to reach consensus across Africa and the Middle East that state collapse is in no one's interest. The common goal of preventing the worst outcome should be overriding different preferences for who should lead the country. Mechanisms for building such consensus existed a decade ago. They included the Sudan Consultative Forum, convened by the United Nations and the African Union, and involving all interested parties, which was left to wither. The African Union Peace Security Council, which has a record of forging such consensus agenda, is a shadow of its former self. The United Nations, meanwhile, has reduced itself to a humanitarian provider and one which is under constant attack as well. For the Sudanese, the stakes are existential, as Ayman has so vividly told us. The state has collapsed, and the path to rebuild it is long and fraught. Atrocities in Western Darfur may amount to genocide. Millions are homeless. Half the country is hungry, with many facing famine. If Sudan remains an international orphan, the calamity will only deepen. We must find ways to do better.
Thank you for that, Mark. I will turn it immediately over to William for our third comment.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and be brief because I noticed Dame Rosalind Marsden is in the audience. Catherine Du, if she would come in after me, I think it would be enormously helpful. Has she gone? No, she's left us. So I was trying to persuade her to come in, but she's ducked away. But the Gaza war has distracted the world from Sudan and Ukraine. Both of these conflicts have become secondary. I hope you can hear me okay. It's raining here, so it's the pitter-patter of the rain is in the background, but hopefully you can hear. Half the population is displaced, and that is just horrifying. And the lack of action by the USA and the United Kingdom really are major contributors to the war, I would say, because the USA and the UK have clout. US still uses sanctions in regard to Sudan. The US can be a major player here. We have gold exports to Russia taking place on a major scale. Russia backs both sides in the Sudan war. So the Kremlin backs the Sudan armed forces, and the rapid support forces are backed by the militia in Russia, and so they're backing both sides. It's most extraordinary, but it enables them to get the gold from both sides. So Russia accesses gold on a major scale, and and now of course the UAE and Egypt are also taking Sudanese gold. But Sudanese gold does not go through normal, honest channels. It gets sold in as part of the proceeds of the warring parties. The idea that Iman suggested that the gold could be held in trust is a wonderful idea, but not practical because the parties that are buying it are not subject to any controls, nor are the parties that are selling it, i.e. the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces. Obviously, the Sudanese Armed Forces are old-fashioned Islamic extremists. They took over government from I don't know whether you remember this, but the women of Sudan led a revolution against former President Bashir of Sudan. And women like Iman stood up to be counted, and they were the leaders of the uprising that led to the installation, the brief installation, or the attempt to install a civilian government, which was overthrown by the military, the same military that had been supporting Bashir. At that time, the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces were together in overthrowing the civilian government. The international community now recognizes this military dictatorship as the government of Sudan, and the opposition are equally questionable. Just to be clear, rape is used as a weapon of war on a massive scale in Sudan by both the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The Rapid Support Forces, as Ambassador Hamley rightly pointed out, were formerly known as the Janjaweed, and the Sudanese Armed Forces are, equally. Well, well, I won't go into it, but rape is a weapon of war used to intimidate and to depopulate areas like Darfur and make it difficult for civilians to exist there. Obviously, I mean, this was alluded to by Iman and Ambassador Hamley, but the various states are backing various sides. For instance, Egypt, paradoxically, because they don't normally like the Muslim Brotherhood, are backing the Sudanese Armed Forces. And for example, the United Arab Emirates are backing the Rapid Support Forces. So they're now each respectively taking some of the goals. As I said, Russia backs both sides, Kremlin backing the Sudanese Armed Forces, the old Wagner, what we used to call the Wagner Group, backing the Rapid Support Forces, enabling it to buy the gold from both sides. Let me just make this clear. It's a huge resource. Sudan is swamped with arms by these nations, absolutely swamped with arms. So much so that it is able to sell arms to Ukraine and sell arms to anybody that wants to buy them. It's a channel for arms. It's another way the generals make money in Sudan, is by selling arms. They also make money by being militia forces in third countries, like for instance, Yemen for years. So hence the way we're going. I mean, we need a civilian government. The countries that act as moderators are not neutral. Saudi Arabia is not neutral in this war. It backs one side. And we need an interest in conflict resolution from the major countries in the world. I mean, it is down to Britain has a historic role, and America is the major power in the world. And Ambassador Hamley said, the United States, I just heard him say, United States is not represented at a high enough level to be taken seriously in Riyadh. I mean, and we really need action from the USA and indeed from Britain, who has an historic role there, in order to move things forward, in my view. It's a critical time, and it is a solvable war if the great powers take an interest in solving it, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you all for those comments, and I hope that we can have a discussion opening up from this point. So I see we have someone in the Q&A, and I'll read out the question for those in the room. How is the current conflict in Sudan linked to the previous conflict that led to the establishment of the separate state of South Sudan? I think that's for any of the speakers here.
Well, if you like, I'll mention something, and then the others. I mean, Sudan has been at war since I remember I visited Sudan when I was about 20 years old. And it's been in a constant state of war since then, except for brief periods. There have been brief periods of peace. But one brief period was when we had General Lagu and President Nimeri have a brief peace settlement. I mean, it is staggering that this has been the case. Now, how is it linked to the South Sudan conflict? I mean, the partition of Sudan was engineered by the British comparatively recently under what was called the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. It was a British brokered deal in which we decided to sacrifice democracy for peace. The Sudanese government agreed to it, and sadly, or whatever, but Sudan was a country of 1 million square miles, and it was the largest country in Africa, and it was split into two on the basis that this would end the war. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement was not comprehensive, and the war went on. It just became more civil war in both South and North, and between the South and the North, and the Darfur War progressed. It didn't bring peace, but it certainly sacrificed democracy, and that was a great British achievement. But there you go. That's my view.
Can I go for a second, if you don't mind, Dr. Warwick?
Please.
Yeah, the Sudanese state, which is like only 68 years old after independence, did not start at that point. We are a multi-ethnic, multi-language, multi-religious society. Unfortunately, some people, they call themselves elites, after the independence, they tried to give an identity to the country and its people. That's why you find the analysis of the North-South problem as imposed Arabization, Islamization for that region. But that is not actually true. That binary definition and the way the conflict was analyzed is not true, because the Sudan as a whole was having the same kind of improper deal and deal making behind the scenes when the British left, but actually in some other cases you can say long before the British left, because the British had the special areas ordinance that you are not allowed as a northerner to go to South Sudan, by the way, unless you have a permission. And the schools, I was born and raised up in the South, and we went to Catholic schools and English schools and all sorts of schools and Arabic schools. It was the matter of the day that you had after independence all over Africa and Asia, whether you become part of the Commonwealth or the Francophone part of the world. Sudan did not want to be part of the Commonwealth, and actually it was not administered, by the way, by the kind of, colony kind of part of the Foreign Office. We were part of another arrangement as the administration in Sudan goes. Then you have the marginalization in terms of economic marginalization in Sudan. The religion kind of marginalization, economic marginalization, the multi-marginality, as some philosophers and political scientists like Mazrui say, the multiple marginality in Sudan. We were hoping for a comprehensive peace agreement. We were hoping for a one Sudan. Everybody was galvanized and spirited and was waiting for the comprehensive peace agreement to happen. What the relationship is, as your participant said and is asking, this is actually very, very similar to other wars going on in Sudan, but the net effect is that it was supported. And we had the UN All Might in Nairobi in 2004 in December, and the IGAD and the friend of IGAD in the shape of the United States and the United Kingdom and Norway, they went and celebrated that secession. They said the president, but what did they do? They leave behind 3-time bombs. Darfur was raging in 2005 when the CPA was signed. And the genocide took place in 2004, but we didn't see any peace in that area. We didn't see peace in Abyei. Up to now, we don't know what is happening with Abyei. It is between two countries. Then you have the Blue Nile area and Nuba Mountains. Still they are in arms. They don't want to have anything to do with the Juba Peace Agreement. For example, you see Abdel Wahid and you see El Helu. This is what happened in the case of the Southern Sudan, setting a very bad precedent in Sudan and leaving the country to be in disarray, and people are following suit. In different, we are set for 5 kind of split or secession as we speak.
Thank you for that. We have, Ambassador Hamley, did you want to answer that as well, or shall we move to another question in our Q&A?
I think that's been adequately answered. Thank you, Professor Warwick.
Dr. Khair. I think you're on mute, but if you unmute yourself, you can.
No. I'm
no, not you.
not on mute. No, I think it's been adequately answered. I would agree with Ayman's last comment that the secession left all sorts of open problems which have to be resolved. Those border regions which have to decide where they want to go, north or south, be prolonged for many years to come, I think now. It's a complicating factor in resolving this current conflict as well.
Thank you for that. We had a question from Dr. Khair, but she's on mute and
Dr. Khair, you seem to be muted and you raised your hand. If you could unmute yourself to make your comment or question.
Hi, thank you. It was an erroneous hand. I know the speakers very, very well, and I'm here to support them and their presentations. Thank you.
Oh, we're glad to have you with us. Thanks. I see we have another question from Dr. Farahat.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you very much for the 3 speakers. The tragedy of Sudan is, of course, heartbreaking. I don't know if I am a dreamer or not. Could the international community impose arms embargo? This is one step. And could the International Criminal Court make a case against not only the top leaders of the 2 sides, but the first and second rank of leaders? I'm talking about no less than 20, 30 military leaders on both sides, and make them fugitives for justice, and tell them clearly that their penalties may be decreased if they stop the war, and make a deal with them, because at the end, the common people, the poor people, are paying the price at all levels. This is my suggestion. Thank you.
Dr.
Farhad, if I may answer Dr. Farhad a moment. I think that's certainly a very a credible approach one could hope will be taken. As you know, the International Court does not do very well in terms of bringing several people to justice, but President Mary, for example, I believe was under a court junction. I don't believe he's been brought to justice yet. But I think certainly as part of a negotiation with these leaders to bring them to a negotiating table, I think quietly this warning could be made to them very, very seriously and might have some effect, because they certainly will not be able to use their ill-gotten gains if they're in prison or isolated in a particular village in Sudan in the future. But that's certainly a point which I think should be kept in mind. But again, we'll have to wait and see how things develop.
I can go next, Dr. Warwick, if you don't mind.
Please.
Yeah, in terms of what I would like to go to what William said, that the gold initiative is not practical. I would like to remind the conference that this is not the first time we are asking for sanctions for the countries that are buying the gold and eliciting in some kind of illegal trade or having anything to do with the arms, kind of supply. I'll come to that for a minute. The United States has published a UAE specific business advisory for Myanmar, Sudan, and South Sudan, and for the private companies during the Russians sanctions. They can actually sanction people and third countries like Uganda and other countries through which the arms come to Sudan. The United Nations knows this. The United Nations knows that we have apparatuses that are enabling these people who are eliciting in our resources and trade that are actually now at large, but there are provisions and precedences to sanction them, their armies, their private companies and gangs, and the third countries through which they go. In terms of arms embargo, for the person who posed the question, there is an arms embargo, by the way, in Sudan, believe it or not. That's why I talked about the letter and the spirit and whether the international community is serious. When they have United Nations Security Council resolution about no fly zone over Darfur and no arms in Darfur. Now in Darfur, there is a genocide and there is war and there are kind of feeding trains from Chad across the border with arms, notwithstanding the non-armed proliferation in the area and non-fly zone. That's why we are talking about restructuring, change the architecture and the architect in international law, in the UN, especially in the UN Security Council and international trade. Arms, we are saying in our kind of proposition in policies, that the arms have to be the confines of states, not commercial companies, and not militias, and not gangs. The women, Dr. Warwick, in 1915, 200 women crossed the Atlantic and came to The Hague. They had the Women Peace Initiative, the basis of the 1325 and its 19 United Nations resolutions now governing conflict and what is happening to women, for example, during that conflict. You have sexual assaults, you have genocide. Women are the pivotal role, as William said, in the revolution. They bore the brunt of the atrocities. They were killed, they were maimed, they were thrown in the Nile, and they were raped. Now they are displaced with their children. Some are dying. We're having women dying before birth or at birth in some clinics in Sudan now because we don't have any infrastructure for health. So the arms is one thing. We are proposing that for these two culprits, generals and their allied militias, we are not telling them to have some kind of incentive. Please do not do this. We are going to do that. We are asking them, Article 16 of the ICC is actually disabled so that Nimeri or Bashir will not go, by the way. It is disabled with the guy under the guise of the international community. They didn't take anybody to the ICC, although there are United Nations Security Council resolutions saying that there was a genocide. They brought the blue helmet. We were under Chapter 7, but nobody went anywhere because there was something under radar screen to say that we are gonna disable Article 16. Nobody is gonna go. You have now a list of people who are now under sanctions and you have companies that are under sanctions. One of our idea in the initiative is to free those frozen assets in banks. If you freeze the assets of people who are criminals because they are trading illicit and illegal things in Sudan, you at least in the international community, financial institution should return that money to Sudan, to the Sudanese, to actually not save them from disaster, to save them from death. We have money now frozen in international institutions. You can free that, but you can also give some kind of incentive for the belligerents to say that you can open the corridors. You know, there was a safe corridor, Dr. Warwick, during the evacuation for the Americans from Sudan, Khartoum. There was a safe corridor for the Americans to go to Soba, where the embassy is situated. There was actually a safe corridor for many Ethiopian aircrafts to come in order to control and monitor and guard the evacuation of the Americans. 700 convoy of cars left Khartoum. 30 hours later, they crossed 800 kilometers to Sudan. It was monitored. It was a safe corridor monitored by satellite. If there is a will, there is a way. The international community knows that they can open safe corridors. It happened during the war. Thank you.
I find that a very persuasive analysis. There are all of these tools and we don't see them used, and it's not always easy for those who aren't very, very familiar with the conflict to understand why that happens. So this is a really, really helpful analysis. We have another question posed in the Q&A. I'll read out for the participants in the room. One of the speakers said the idea of gold for food is impossible. Could you kindly elaborate?
Yeah, the goal for food is not impossible at all. You know how much, circulation that very humble initiative has garnered up to now, Dr. Warwick? Even people from the military and the Ministry of Finance contacted me saying, can we actually discuss it with you? And we are having some people contacting us from consultancy firms around the world because they know that we are not asking for oil for food like in Iraq, because you remember that was a scandal that made the United Nations have a very bad name and so many people resigned because the Americans were occupying Iraq and they only sold the oil so that they give 20% as compensation. We are not saying that. People always remember that there was a scandal called oil for food. Ours is different. It is gold, coastline along the Red Sea, and a natural resource initiative, a comprehensive initiative. Italy, we know that is part of the EU. In its parliament, if we know that we can go and say that, Italy is trading in gold with a non-legitimate government in Sudan. This government is not legitimate after the coup of 2021. We do not have a constitution. This is not a legitimate government. You cannot deal with it. You cannot deal with it, Turkey. You cannot deal with, because they want to come to Sawakin to have a military base there. No, we can find a way. There is no impossibility. Everything that is governing international institutions and the global economy of trade is not divine revelations. They are things and policies made by people. If I tell Turkey, please do not give the money to Hemeti or to Burhan in Port Sudan and send us food stuff, I don't know what is impossible about that. I don't know why we are telling people that, okay, come and take, you know what is happening now? The most dangerous thing is our heritage. The size of the UNESCO in Northern Sudan, the hundreds of pyramids and the hundreds of temples are now looted. The international community needs to know that it is not the Sudan that is affected only. We have so many stuff at stake, and now with the chaos, with the rift and division inside RSF, with the under the table kind of negotiation, the secret thing in Manama and in Egypt next week in Saudi Arabia is not going to help anybody. You have to bring the stakeholders in a Gramscian kind of real guard, not the avant-garde. Bring people around to talk, bring the people who have been having their livelihoods taken to the extent that they are selling their lives in order to join the militias to get some money to live, selling their life to die for a livelihood. This is how stark the situation is. Gold is the possibility for me as a Sudanese. I have debt of 64 billion pounds. Per capita debt is on my head, but I also have resources, endowments, solar energy, minerals, gold, uranium, lead, silicon, 180 million hectares, fresh water, rivers running, not to mention the underground water and the rain. So we are also wealthy, not 90% according to the statistics I'm reading now from the UN under the poverty line. No, we are very, very not poor and fully resourced and endowed. So we also would like to change the way poverty is calculated and the sustainable development goals are calculated. That's why I'm going in July to see the high level, panel when it is actually meeting. They need to change the definition like that. We will die with all these resources going around circulating. No, the goal for food is not impossible. It is gold resource and the cost initiative. All these resources have to be traded now by us, the Sudanese civilians, not the military. They will come and we will talk to them. We'll talk with everybody. If even another terrestrial kind of creature came to Earth, we will talk to it because you know what is at stake? 18 people are gonna die before December 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if we have any more questions, either from participants in the room or from any of our participants online. Or additional comments that our speakers would like to add here.
I would just like to note that the extent to which humanitarian aid is needed in Sudan is absolutely enormous. The humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths and the UN refugee chief Filippo Grande have appealed for $4.1 billion in support in order to keep this famine at bay. That's a huge amount of money. And with other crises, this is where the problem is. You have folks that just don't have enough money to give. So we have to find a way to mobilize resources in the Gulf and other places as well to try and support this effort.
I'll try and say something. Rain is in Berlin is pretty terrific, and it's pattering on the roof. My wife wanted to come in with a comment about the situation of women, just briefly, Veronica, while they can hear us.
Yes, Patricia Parker, I was talking to her for Kids to Kin, and she actually said that it's so frightening for women, because it's become, rape has become a local thing, and there's so much rape going on, and she really felt it was stopping people from moving about countryside, especially women walking around the countryside because of rape and such a high prevalence of rape in the surrounding area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major problem in areas like Darfur, where, yes, almost particularly by the, I suppose now by the government forces and the rapid support forces, but certainly the Sudan Armed Forces and the RSF are responsible for this. I don't know whether you can hear me all right. I hope you can. Catherine, can you hear me over the rain?
Yes, you're very clear. We can't hear the rain at all.
Well, we were in the middle of a storm here, so there goes the thunder. But just to say that, just to add a couple of points, on the weapons, let me reiterate, it would be very nice to have a weapons embargo. Sudan is flooded with weapons for years. It used to be China was the main supplier and people would buy Chinese weapons, but they come from all over. The weapons, people used to smuggle weapons up to Gaza from Sudan. Sudan has been selling weapons for years to the world, and the world has been supplying weapons to the generals in Sudan on an industrial scale. Weapons from everywhere flood through Sudan. So it's a major problem to stop countries supplying weapons to Sudan and through Sudan to the wider world, Ukraine, Gaza, and all points everywhere. As for justice, we have tried war crimes tribunals approach before with Sudan. President Bashir, as you will know, was indicted for war crimes. As was a governor in central Sudan, the indictments caused. You could argue, I'm not sure Eman would argue, but you could argue that the indictments actually held up the peace process and made things more difficult. Bashir is, just decided not to travel, and that's often what happens, and became more reluctant or less interested in a peace process. And of course, he was dictator of Sudan for many years, and now those that run and dictate Sudan now are his. I guess they've inherited the cloak from him. They're his people. So it's a problem. The Iman suggests we should use Sudanese money for the Sudanese. The trouble is, if you free up that money that's frozen, Sudanese money that's frozen, it's not going to go to the Sudanese. It'll end up in the hands of the Sudanese armed forces. It's very hard to get. You have to get an independent government, and I'm all for that. Maybe the only way forward, but you need immense pressure, and these armed forces are the proxies of various international actors, and you need pressure from those actors. Gold for food, I mean, lovely. If you could, again, you need a government that was not the present government. The present government of Sudan is a military government that is selling gold, and the opposition is a military opposition, the Rapid Support Forces, that is selling gold. And to stop them selling gold and to get food for gold, you need a civilian government that, or some mechanism by which you could get somebody else to sell gold other than the two powers in control in Sudan. So it's a very difficult situation. And yes, I think what we need is strong action from the two major countries, and I include Britain. Britain and the United States of America are both big players in Sudan, and Egypt is, and Egypt could possibly broker peace. It backs one side, but then we have had Saudi Arabia pretending to broker peace, and it backs one side. No, Egypt is possible. Maybe we try anything, but we need somebody to broker peace. If America and Britain will not do it because we are not that interested and we're too preoccupied with Gaza, we need somebody to step up to the plate that is got enough clout to actually to move things forward. And now is the time, I'd say, for that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I will answer the gold concept. It seems that there must be a conceptual frame in people's mind that if the belligerents are controlling the gold, either through official or non-official kind of channels, that is going to be impossible for anybody to do anything. We are leaving these guys alone. We are talking about people who are buying the gold. People who bought the gold can that kind of return in terms of medical and food stuff. It is not only the gold. Again, the United States has a monopoly in all Kordofan forests of Gum Arabic in order to do their oil purification and extraction in the industry. As the same kind of vein with which the United States went and occupied Iraq without going to the United Nations Security Council, things can be done. It has been done before. You don't need to go to the Security Council to secure Sudan or to protect the civilians or to have corridors open. You can do stuff because America has all this might and this kind of hyphae and legitimacy. We will not only blame ourselves or the kind of the fate that we are having ourselves, we are blaming the doctrines and the kind of ideology that is informing people. Imagine there is something called zakat, the alms, and the endowments, al-awqaf. These are formidable sources for helping people. They have a lot of Islamic countries. They know this something can be used to help zakat.
But Iman, you want, I mean, the people who are buying the gold are Russia, Ukraine, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt.
And Egypt
You
other
want them
people.
to provide food instead of weapons and money?
Exactly, and not only that, when you said that the
It's not going to
ICC
change their ways, Iman.
it is actually, we are talking about putting them in the gray areas, and we have all those kind of operators in France, you know, the people who regulate the kind of things and punish people and pressure them. It has been done before. We're not asking for anything new for people to improvise about. You can sanction these people because of the energy problem with the UAE and the West. They don't want to sanction them. You can sanction third countries through which the UAE works. Why would anybody have Ukraine fighting Wagner because of the Russian nexus in Sudan? And we think that it is impossible. Would anybody think that the justice of power is different than the power of justice? When you say that Bashir was indicted, but he didn't go, he asked, why would Israel, which is actually killing people and children in incubators, why didn't you take them to the ICC? We have the power of justice not being seen, and as the United Nations and United Kingdom know, power of justice need to be seen when it is done. You cannot take Israel and take al-Bashir. And if the United States is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, Sudan is also not a signatory. That's why it was crippled, the Achilles heel. We had Trojan horses and Achilles heels in the international justice system. That's why you cannot impose it. I asked Ocampo, myself in London School of Economics, why didn't you take Israel and then please come and take Bashir? He said, I was not told to talk about Israel. Ocampo told us in public. So it was a partial justice. It is the justice of those the powers to be. It is not the power of justice that is being actually implemented. So you are not going to be having any power of justice if the justice is seen as partial. We, the Sudanese, we are not there. It is a willfully ignored crisis. When you are deemed ignored, it means that you are not existent. It means that you are not there to be counted. But if you have all this gold, 29 billion of gold of 13 companies, Russian companies working now in Kordofan alone, building all that arsenal, the West knows that where the gold has come from. They know for specific reasons where the gum Arabic is going. Let the gold now, it is an initiative that is going to be having immediate effect in the medium term and the long term. Maybe later on we will do something about the impossibility and some kind of the romantic thing or political thing about initiatives of gold. Let us do with gum Arabic, please. All during the sanctions, the United States bought the gum Arabic, although it by itself unilaterally imposed sanctions on Sudan. Can you please repatriate the money that you actually paid for the gum Arabic? And you are now continuing to take the gum Arabic through South Sudan, by the way, $200 billion a year. Can you please repatriate that money somehow in terms of humanitarian exchange? I am not going to be saying humanitarian assistance. We are not asking for any kind of favors. It is not humanitarian assistance, humanitarian exchange. The April 15th France conference should be humanitarian exchange for Sudan in exchange for its resources. It can be done. People have to know that justice and power and all these things are relative when it comes to Africans, to Sudanese, people like us. The Islamic countries can use zakat. It's a big
We're going to run out of time. I think Amanda, Eva wants to ask a question. I don't know whether, yeah, I agree with you.
Dr. Karen, would you like to ask a question? You're on mute, I think.
She has a hand up. I thought she was going to ask.
Yes, thank you, William. It's more of a comment, actually. I was just thinking in relation to Gaza, which is obviously a main feature of the call. I think one of the other challenges of what's happening in Gaza at the moment, as well as the diversion of media and political attention and resources, diversion of aid meant for Sudan to Gaza, and sort of proxy relations, is that actually it's been the test case for the multilateral institutional system, which the multilateral system is failing, which the United States is failing. And I think when it comes to sort of Sudan's particularly geocomplex situation with the kind of multiple fora for ceasefire, the lack of funding, the lack of clear leadership, I think what we've seen sort of in at least the past 6 months when it comes to conflicts like Sudan, like in Gaza and elsewhere, is that actually, moral imperatives, rule of law, international humanitarian law, and all of these mores of multilateralism and the kind of world system that we have set up, they are not standing up to the task. And that's what's, really making the situation very, very difficult in real time. Sudan's crisis started before Gaza and, Gaza's latest onslaught, and it's further complicating it just by the way of virtue of the system. So I just want to sort of draw the link between the two. And while I'm not saying that it's hopeless, I do think that we need maybe innovative thinking, new ways of doing business, because unfortunately over humanitarian law and sort of moral stances, it seems to be more allyship and interests that are leading things. And so, if gold is something that can be leveraged, or other points of leverage in Sudan's case, I think that is part of the innovative thinking that we're going to have to take forward, rather than, ICC and chapters and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. It looks like we are now out of time. So I want to thank all of our participants. This has been a really enlightening and really wonderful discussion. So thank you for your time and expertise here. And thanks also to our attendees.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, Dr. Warwick, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, man.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
And thank you, Eva, for that very important last comment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Nice to see
My
you all.
pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Warwick. Thanks a lot for the
Thank you
organizers as well, for the
Thank you,
participants as
Catherine.
well.
Yeah.
All right,
Bye,
bye-bye.
Steve. Bye-bye.
Bless you.